So they found Joseph Couch. Joseph Couch did exactly what he said he was going to do. Shoot a bunch of, do a little rampage shooting and then kill himself. So they found Joseph Couch dead. That was the I-75 shooter. And then the Russell County, you had a cop who shot a cop while they were trying to arrest somebody else. And then you had the sheriff who shot and killed a judge. And so because of all these crimes in Kentucky, I actually want to take a look at their laws when it comes to murder. So you have KRS chapter 507, and there's 7 sections for KRS chapter 507. Point 10, point 20, point 30, 40, 50, 60, and 70. Now you have definitions for the chapter: murder, manslaughter in the first degree, manslaughter in the second degree, reckless homicide, vehicular homicide, and murder of a first responder. Which is interesting, because if the judge would have shot the cop, then he would have been charged with first degree murder and then also murder of a first responder. He would have been charged with 2 counts. Now, I was taking a look at murder in the first degree. That's the only murder is in the first degree. That's the only one that Kentucky has. There is no murder in the second degree, third degree, fourth degree. Now, I always thought that murder in the first degree was that there was deliberation. So you had planned it out and then you went and did it. And then whereas murder in the second degree was that you just did it at the spur of the moment in a heat of passion. So you knowingly killed the person, but you didn't walk out of your house that day thinking that it was going to happen. So murder in the first degree, there's a definition here, and I'll go ahead and actually just read the definition. So 507.02, I'm going to read all these definitions, but I'll do the definitions at the end actually. So 507.020 murder. 1. A person is guilty of murder when A, with intent to cause the death of another person, he causes the death of such person or of a third person, except that in any prosecution a person shall not be guilty under this subsection if he acted under the influence of extreme emotional disturbance for which there was a reasonable explanation or excuse, the reasonableness of which is to be determined from the viewpoint of a person in the defendant's situation under the circumstances as the defendant believed him to be. However, nothing contained in this section shall constitute a defense to a prosecution for or preclude a conviction of manslaughter in the first degree or any other crime. 1B is a person is guilty of murder when including but not limited to the operation of a motor vehicle under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to human life, he wantonly engages in conduct which creates a grave risk of death to another person and thereby causes the death of another person. So if you're driving a motor vehicle, so that could be a golf cart, right? A boat, a golf cart, a car, truck, a tank. If you're just driving with extreme indifference and then it happens, then you're putting everybody's life at risk, but nobody was hurt, and then you did hit the person and they died. So those are the 2 definitions of murder in the first degree. And then 2, murder is a capital offense. So if you're convicted of murder in the first degree, then you could be put to death in the state of Kentucky. There is a couple things I want to mention. So the very first part of the definition, with intent to cause the death of another person, he causes the death of such person or of a third person with the intent. It's hard to prove intent or knowingly or what the person was actually thinking. Did they have deliberation? Did they walk out of the door? Did they plan the thing? They're going to go to this spot and go ahead and do the foul evil deed. So the first part I want to mention is Kentucky needs to get second degree murder. There needs to be a first degree murder and a second degree murder. The second part is when you cause the death of that person or of a third person. So you try to kill the person A tried to kill person B, but person C walked in front. Well, that means that cop who shot a cop in Russell County, that's what he did. You intended to shoot another person and somebody walked in front of that person and then you shot that third person. And then the next part, this defense can be used only for murder. None of the other murders You could use this defense for murder in the first, but if you do manslaughter in the first degree, second degree, or reckless homicide, vehicular homicide, or murder of a first responder, you're not allowed to use this second part as a defense. And the second part is this: except in any prosecution, a person shall not be guilty under this subsection if he acted under the influence of extreme emotional disturbance for which there is a reasonable explanation or excuse. And then the reasonable standard is used after that. So that means the sheriff who killed the judge, if he could somehow say, well, you don't understand, he gave me extreme emotional disturbance for which there was a reasonable explanation or excuse. Chaplinsky, they said that was fighting words. Should have got a drink. Should I redo this and get a drink? No. We'll carry on. So when the sheriff shot the judge, if the judge had called him a fascist, because in Chaplinsky it says if you call a fascist, well, that's fighting words. So if you use fighting words, well, you're a fascist. Well, does that make a person extremely emotionally disturbed? And then there was a reasonable explanation or excuse. Excuse me, Your Honor. No, excuse me. Is that what the sheriff is going to have to say? No, Your Honor, you don't understand. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he called me a fascist, and that heightened my sense of awareness. That was fighting words, so that pushed me to an extreme emotional disturbance. And why did it happen? Because he called me a fascist. And then it says, or excuse. Or excuse? So let's say something bigger than just fighting words. Let's say that the judge said that he was going to have him arrested for contempt. Well, if you do A, B, and C, then I'll have you arrested for contempt. In fact, I'm going to arrest you for contempt right now. Hey, bailiff, come in here. Bailiff, come in here and arrest him for contempt. And he was like, don't you dare do that to me. I'm the sheriff. I'm the top cop. Well, I'm going to get you arrested and I don't give a damn. So he was going to have him arrested for contempt, and so therefore the sheriff had extreme emotional disturbance, and he had a reasonable explanation. Well, he had an excuse. He had an excuse. An excuse? As long as you got some excuse for why you were being a pissed off piece of shit, you don't understand. I mean, I thought that maybe it had been something significant. They were sleeping with each other's wives. There was some kind of corrupt land deal. You know, maybe he scuffed up his car. Maybe he wrecked into his car. Property damage, right? Murder, stealing, assault. Maybe there was some other murder that was being covered up, and he'll say, well, I'll expose you for that murder that you... So that's weird. That first degree murder in Kentucky, you could use the excuse that the person had pushed you into an extreme emotional disturbance. And then, because in my mind, well, and then you can't use that defense for any of the other lesser murder charges. So for the worst murder charge, you could use an excuse. And in my mind, there's two ways that it would be justifiable. So if the sheriff had gone to make an arrest and the person acted crazy, well, I'm not going to let you arrest me. And he starts wiggling around, and then he kind of throws his hands out, and he throws his hands out like towards the sheriff's gun. And then the sheriff says, he's going for my gun. That's been used as an excuse for a cop to murder somebody. So private police action or self-defense are the two justifiable ways. So I feel like self-defense, your life was in danger, or serious bodily injury. The judge went for him and he's like, I'm just going to choke the shit out of you. The judge pulled out a gun. The judge pulled out a knife. And so therefore, the sheriff thought his life was in danger, or that he was about to receive seriously bodily injury. Now, citizen's arrest is legal in Kentucky, which means the judge could have arrested the cop, or the cop could have arrested the judge. So for a private police action or for an arrest, to turn into a homicide, you would have to think again that you had to defend yourself. Why? Because your life was in danger of serious bodily injury. You go to make the arrest, the person is sitting there fighting you, you think he's reaching for your gun, and therefore he put your life in danger. Possible serious bodily injury could have happened to you. Those are the only two defenses. You're trying to make an arrest, a private police action, or a police action, or self-defense, and both of them land on self-defense. But this is not an excuse. This is not a defense. Oh, but Your Honor, let me give you my excuse. He said that I was one dumb, ugly son of a bitch. He said I was a dumb, stupid, uneducated, ugly, mean, cruel, tyrannical, authoritarian, dirty, rotten son of a bitch. And that's the explanation. It's a reasonable explanation. It is, Judge. It's my excuse. It's my reasonable explanation of why I had an extreme emotional disturbance over it. Just that sentence alone makes me think you're fucking guilty. Even if your life was in danger and there was serious bodily injury. Well, my life was in danger. Well, there could have been serious bodily injury. Well, my excuse is this. My reasonable explanation, he had a knife. So my reasonable explanation is when a person has a knife, then my influence, I'm under the influence of an extreme emotional disturbance. So it's weird that you could use that for first-degree murder. There's no second-degree murder, but you can't use it for manslaughter in the first degree or for any other crime. So all the other murders, you had manslaughter in the first degree, manslaughter in the second, reckless homicide, vehicular homicide, and murder of a first responder. You're not allowed to use that excuse or reasonable explanation that you had an extreme emotional disturbance. You're under the influence of an extreme emotional disturbance for those crimes. That makes no sense. And it even says you're not allowed to use that defense. And then, of course, it adds that motor vehicle thing. So if you were doing reckless motor vehicle, you could be charged with murder, but not motor vehicle. If you do reckless motor vehicle, you could be charged with both reckless homicide and reckless vehicular murder. And then manslaughter in the first, I mean, people have accidents, you know, that's not murder in the first degree. So let's go ahead and read the rest of these definitions. Manslaughter in the first degree is 507.030. Number 1, and there's 4 sections. 1, A, B, C, and D. A person is guilty of manslaughter in the first degree when A, with intent to cause serious physical injury to another person, he or she causes the death of such person or of a third person. B, with intent to cause the death of another person, he or she causes the death of such person or of a third person under circumstances which do not constitute murder because he or she acts under the influence of extreme emotional disturbance as defined in subsection 1A of KRS 507.020. It said that you weren't allowed to use that excuse. And now it's saying you are allowed to use that excuse? Oh, no, which doesn't. Okay. The circumstances. 1C. Through circumstances not otherwise constituting the offense of murder, he or she intentionally abuses another person or knowingly permits another person of whom he or she has actual custody to be abused and thereby causes death to a person 12 years of age or less, or who is physically helpless or who is physically helpless or mentally helpless. Or D, he or she knowingly sells fentanyl or a fentanyl derivative to another person in the injection, ingestion, inhalation, or other introduction of the fentanyl or fentanyl derivative causes the death of the person. Manslaughter in the first degree is a Class B felony. Murder is a capital offense, so life in prison is at the second. And then a Class B felony? What's a Class A felony? Murder in the second degree, 507.0401, A, B, C, and D. Another 4 sections. A person is guilty of manslaughter in the second degree when he or she wantonly causes the death of another person, including but not limited to situations where the death results from the person's A, operation of a motor vehicle. Again with the motor vehicle. We already have, well, B, leaving a child under the age of 8 years in a motor vehicle under circumstances which manifest an extreme indifference to human life and which create a grave risk of death to the child, thereby causing the death of the child. So if you keep the windows up and they get microwaved to death. C, unlawful distribution for remuneration. Remuneration. What is remuneration? Remuneration. Money paid for a work or service. Why not just say for something that you get paid for? Unlawful distribution for remuneration of a Schedule 1 or 2 controlled substance when the controlled substance is the proximate cause of death. So if you distribute a Schedule 1 or 2 controlled substance, which marijuana is still Schedule 1, right? Medical marijuana is legal. Hemp is legal, but not recreational. But let's say something like fentanyl or something. D, well, I guess this says fentanyl, so it'd have to be like cocaine or something. D, a person is guilty of manslaughter in the second degree when he or she wantonly causes the death of another person, including but not limited to situations where the death results from the person's D, knowing distribution of fentanyl or a fentanyl derivative to another person without remuneration, and the injection, inhalation, or other introduction of the fentanyl or fentanyl derivative causes the death of the person. Manslaughter in the second degree is a Class C felony. All right, so now we have reckless homicide. And what is reckless homicide? 507.050, reckless homicide. Number 1, a person is guilty of reckless homicide when, with recklessness, he causes the death of another person. 2, reckless homicide is a Class D felony. Vehicular homicide. 507060, vehicular homicide. 1, a person is guilty of vehicular homicide when he or she causes the death of another. And B, the death results from the person's operation of a motor vehicle, including but not limited to boats and airplanes under the influence of alcohol, controlled substance, or other substance which impairs driving ability as described in KRS 189A.010. So what's 189A.010? Vehicular homicide is a Class B felony. So it says and. So you're guilty of vehicular homicide when you cause the death of another person, but including but not limited to. Okay, I see. So if you're driving drunk and you accidentally, recklessly, negligently kill somebody, but you were drunk, well, then they're going to say that's vehicular homicide, and that's a Class B felony. 2 is vehicular homicide is a Class B felony. But it says and, the death results from the person's operation of a motor vehicle, including but not limited to boats and airplanes under the influence of alcohol, controlled substance, or other substance which impairs driving ability. Murder of a first responder. Are they more important than us? So the judge shoots the cop, well, he gets 2 charges, but a cop shoots a judge, he gets 1 charge. These murder laws kind of suck. I wish we had like legislators, like people that we elected like every 2 years to kind of clean this shit up. This is a fucking mess. These laws are a damn mess. Because even though there's other crimes, well, let's just do murder of a first responder. Well, no, let's not. Yeah, hold on. Let's do the murder of a first responder, but I want to use, if you have reckless homicide, but you can't use the excuse that you can't use the excuse or the reasonable explanation that the person pushed you into an extreme emotional disturbance. You could be weak-kneed, you could be very insecure. Your Honor, he pushed me into this extreme emotional disturbance, and I didn't want to do vehicular homicide or reckless homicide or manslaughter in the first or second degree. He pushed me for murder in the first. And not even murder in the first, just fucking murder. Because there is no first or second or third degree murder, just first degree. the top. That's it. They only have one definition. There's only one murder in Kentucky. Murder of a first responder, 507.0701. As used in this section, first responder means A, a peace officer, B, paid or volunteer emergency medical services or rescue personnel, C, a paid or volunteer member of an organized fire department, or D, personnel of a private non-profit organization providing fire, rescue, or emergency medical services engaged at the time of the act in the lawful performance of his or her duties. So, a peace officer, a cop, paid or volunteer EMS, paid or volunteer, fire department, EMS, police officer, or even a person of a private non-profit organization. A private non-person, so they paid them to do fire, rescue, or EMS. A person is guilty of murder of a first responder when, with the intent to cause the death of a first responder, he or she causes the death of a first responder, notwithstanding KRS Chapter 532. Murder of a first responder is a capital offense, and the person shall be sentenced to death or imprisonment for life without benefit of probation or parole. Holy shit.